It has become a sport of a lesser popularity, taken over by the more appealing MMA fights and professional wrestling. However, boxing has continued its existence and created quite the fan base. It's gone from dark beginnings, evolving to what it is today, and eventually becoming a national pastime. Let's begin with this history. Many historians have debated where boxing originated from. Some have even concluded there have been various artifacts that dictate that boxing originated in the times of ancient Egypt and pharaohs. However, many widely accept that it began as an Olympic game in ancient Greece around 688 BC. Back then, boxing was considered as only two fighters in the Olympic Games. However, it's not as it was today. They fought to the death. Basic rules were no holds or wrestling, no eye gouging, no ring limitations or time. Anything else went. Fighters fought to the death, and that was it. They won by incapacitation, or if possible, a stated forfeit. The only protection they had was leather bound straps around their wrists. And back then, it didn't matter where you were outclassed by weight, whoever you fought was your opponent, and that you had to deal with. Eventually, the Olympic Games started to favor swordsmanship and other weapons as part of the fights. So boxing eventually died out in this early primitive form. However, it didn't mean it would die out in turn eventually. England eventually got intrigued by the sport. Eventually, in 1743, a set of rules was mandated by a champion of bare-knuckle boxing, John Broughton, which eventually became known as the Broughton Rules. One of the first rules made for boxing. 7 rules, and 7 rules only. An arena was finally dictated. Downs had a time limit of 1 minute and 30, which allowed boxers to get up from their own power and strength to keep on fighting. If not, they were declared the loser. Seconds and referees were now allowed. Winners were decided by a failure to show, or seconds throwing in the towel, to at least let more fighters fight within a night. Winnings were now split, 2/3 for the winner, and the rest for the gamblers who bet on these champions. Referees were also decided publicly at the match, without any prior hand, to somewhat allow some fairness in the fight. And, for honor's sake, no hitting a person while they were down. Eventually, they were revised into 29 rules known as the Lysen Prize Ring Rules in 1838. There wasn't many differences other than a few detailed specifications, but the major differences were more limitations on the arena was set, especially around a 24 by 24 foot ring roll. A handkerchief was allowed by each boxer to put on the top post of their corner as a sense of pride, which would be then taken by the winner as in a sense to take the pride away from the loser. And seconds were given more liberty to kill their boxers as they weren't allowed that much before. And illegal blows were finally defined, as you couldn't hit below the belt or use your elbow. Eventually, the Marquess of Queensberry Rules, created by John Graham Chambers and John Douglas, the 9th Marquess of Queensberry Rules, were finally mandated. They were now down to 12. As before, the ring was finally detailed to 20 foot ring, or a practical size. There was no wrestling or clinging as the day before, and the minutes were finally intervaled at 3 minutes with a minute rest in between. 10-second downs were now mandated, and hanging on the ropes, or if on one knee, was finally considered a down. No seconds were allowed in the ring anymore until the rest in between rounds. If fights were ever interfered with, referees had finally the power to reschedule the fight unless the fighters agreed to a no contest or a draw. Laws were finally advocated or forced onto boxers to prevent any real head trauma or anything. If damaged, the referee was allowed to stop the fight until properly replaced. And for just added measure, shoes were not allowed to be spiked or spring to give unfair advantage to fighters. However, boxing was soon prohibited around the 1900s due to its dubious legitimacy as a real sport, and as it was tied to the underground due to massive gambling and sort of fixed fights. However, it took promoters such as champion Jack Dempsey to change these views and allow it to continue into what we see today. Since then, boxing has become a national pastime. It's become available to many people in 2 levels of competition, like myself and many others. We compete at the amateur level, which is allowed for collegiate and Olympic athletes. And for the most popular one, professional boxing, for fame and fortune, and where boxers are ranked. Separate divisions such as the World Boxing Association, Boxing Organization, Boxing Council, and International Boxing Federation have been created in order to please these fighters. Weight classes now, to add a source of fairness, ranging from heavyweight to the little petite strawweight, have been created to allow for skill levels to not be overmatched. Since then, many countries worldwide have taken up the sport, ranging from here in the United States to mainland American countries to even far west in Europe. It's served as a source of unity due to the honor in the sport. Role models such as Pacquiao, Ali, Dempsey, and De La Hoya have sprouted and served as a role model for many. I know I personally have looked up to De La Hoya due to his work through Golden Boy Promotions, a boxing promotional organization he created himself. One that strives to bring honor back to the sport due to its dubious legitimacy even continuing today. One key fact of Golden Boy Promotions is it strives to bring keep troubled teens and other troubled youths from getting into many crimes that are stereotyped today. As one can see, boxing has had quite the interesting upbringing, going from its dark history, its long evolution, and finally becoming a pastime for this current generation who's come to love and discover the sport. I know I personally wouldn't be the same without it, and many others too. It still perseveres today with a great deal of sportsmanship and impact the sporting world today.